Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of this podcast series that I'm doing with Alessandro. So, in this podcast series, we are looking into the psychology behind marketing and how different elements of these psychological behaviors impact the way we do marketing and the way in which our marketing is received. So, for those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Simon Batchelor. I'm a marketing consultant and I've been running a marketing consultancy for 21 years now. And also, last year, I wrote a book called Reframing Marketing, which is all about how to do ethical and effective marketing. So, Alessandro, do you want to give us an intro for those who are new to the feed?
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. So, hello everyone. My name is Alessandro and I'm based in Brighton. I help professionals like coaches, consultants, accountants, and solicitors and tech companies to build the confidence in understanding who is the ideal client, what language this ideal client speaks, and also why they should choose you as the expert. So this allowed you to boost your revenue, to cut marketing costs, and also become the go-to expert.
Excellent. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about using the client's perspective in your marketing communications. So, to start us off, Alessandro, do you want to talk about why the client's perspective is important in marketing communication?
Yes, it's really, really important because if we think about last time, so the previous discussion was about the difference between the want and the needs. And if we think about as a professional, we want to put in the shoes of our client or our customer, what most people like refer as empathy. So if we don't put in the shoes of our ideal client, most of the time we create something which is good for us because we had maybe a problem in the past, we created a solution and now we are selling the solution, but it might not reflect what the other person actually want from us. So putting the shoes of our ideal client allowed us to create empathy, but also create a connection that allowed us to provide them a solution rather than just selling a product or a service.
Yeah, I think that's a really important observation because when people are looking to write their sales copy or they are looking at how to explain their offer to their prospective clients, quite often people get focused on, well, I've created this thing and here's all the great things it does, and here's how I'm going to deliver all of these great things for you. And although that can seem like a really helpful way of describing it, often that isn't very useful from the client's point of view because it's not explaining where the client is now, what the client's thinking, feeling, doing now, and how what your product or service offers is going to help them get to where they want to be. And there's this
Yes.
disconnect between the way people describe what their product and service is all about, when really it isn't really about you at all. It's actually about the client and where they are now and how your product and service is going to make a change for them. And that change is the thing that they are looking for at that point. And as we've already discussed in a different episode about needs and wants, it's all about honing in on those client wants and saying, well, this product can help you get what you want right now. So if we think about the different ways in which we can approach client communication, something you shared with me previously, Alessandro, was the 5 pillars of client communication. So do you want to explain those now for the listeners?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, like when we're going to tailor our communication, the first thing that we want to have is clarity. We want to make something which is very clear for the other
Mm,
person. Because when we are expert, we assume that people know what we are talking about, or we assume that they know they have a problem. Instead, when we are very, very clear with our communication, in particular when we avoid jargon, sometimes we use words that are really, really difficult for a person to understand. But as expert, we don't realize that. So clarity is the first thing. As we said, empathy. So when we put in the shoes of the other person, for example, listening, we need to listen the other person felt that we are listening their problem. We try to adapt our product or service or our communication to what they said that they want. The transparency, how we can like help them to move from A, where they are now, to B, where they want to be. So allow them to also experience the transformation. Be very, very transparent with our communication, not just to be clear. I think the fourth one is that one of the most challenging is responsiveness. We want to be responsive to our, for example, communication. So if I put a social media post, a lot of people comment my social media post, but I don't reply. We started attaching the everything that we did together in terms of empathy. So be very, very active. Create this kind of connection that if you get an email, if you get a comment, try to create this connection, nurture this connection, because you have already invested a lot of time. And personalization is very, very important, because you, even like when you mention the name of the other person, or also like the category. I work with professionals, but if I say I help a consultant and coaches, if you are a consultant or coach, you feel, wow, Alessandro is talking about me. So just the personalization is much better if we go at a very deep level, emotional level, where we really tell them what they are experiencing, because they feel, wow, Alessandro Simon really understands. So they are the expert that we need to have maybe a chat. And that is the reason why you start competing on results and value rather than just on price. So just to summarize, clarity, empathy, transparency, responsiveness, and personalization are the five pillars of clear communication or effective communication.
I think that's really interesting because all of those things, I think, are things that individually people think about when they're writing, but actually taking them all and linking them all together, as you've just done, I think will really help people in sort of switch up the way they're communicating what they're offering. And I think one thing that ties back to the other conversation we had around needs and wants is that element of personalization. And it's about thinking,
Mhm.
okay, well, imagine your ideal client right now. So let's say it's a business customer. Just imagine them sat at their desk at their computer right now. What are they frustrated with? What's the thing that is holding them back in their day? What is stopping them getting done what they want to get done? And if you can write from that perspective, so if you can almost name the person, are you a coach or consultant who is finding this frustrating, who is struggling to get this done? Maybe you've tried this, maybe you're currently doing that. This is how these things all link together to be where you are now. Even just starting your sales copy with that can really help someone think, wow, this is just for me. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And I think that client perspective can really help shift your marketing from feeling like, "Oh, I'm not sure if I want to buy this," which is often what people say when they're not quite sure it's for them, to someone thinking, well, this is just for me. So, how do I get involved in this?
Yeah.
Because this is obviously just for me. This is for the people like me who are doing, thinking, feeling things like me right now. So, this is what I want. Tell me more about this. And as you hinted at there, what that does is it shifts the conversation from being about price, which means I don't think this is for me. So, all I've got to talk to you about is the price, to this feels exactly like what I'm looking for. So price isn't really the top factor. Price will come into it, but it's not the top factor. The key thing is this looks like what I want. Can you confirm to me that this does everything I think it's going to do? And it just changes that conversation completely. It's amazing what that difference in perspective can have. So, Alessandro, do you have any other thoughts around that or other things that you think people should be considering when they're thinking about the client perspective?
Yes, I think the most important thing, as I said, and as you shared, is to put in the shoes of the other person. And when we put in the shoes of the other person, we create trust, because sometimes we try to look to the other person very, very intelligent, very smart. So we start using very complex language. While when we reduce the complexity of our language, we create familiarity. The familiarity creates trust in the other person. We just buy from people that we trust, not everyone. So from the trust, we move maybe to loyalty, because they might, like the client or the customer, start suggesting your product or service to someone else, like a friend, or they might make another purchase from you. So simplification, I think, is the best thing in order to save a lot of marketing cost and increase your revenue, because people don't need to look for an alternative. You are the solution. And when you are the solution and they start recommending you to someone else, you have reduced a lot of marketing investment. So clarity, I think, and don't try to look smart with jargon is the most important thing.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. I see it a lot where I see people describing their product or service and they get really stuck into the details and the jargon and the technicalities of it. And I always think,
Yes.
oh, I don't need to know this. This is just way too much detail. Whereas when I look at the things that I've purchased or the products or the services that I've chosen, or even the companies that I feel like these are the people I need to speak to, and I'm just going to pick up the phone and talk to them right now. It's always the language which is written with my perspective in mind, where they've explained very clearly, very simply what's going to happen. And they're almost enticing me to get in touch to find out more, to ask those questions, and to have that more technical conversation. And I think that's where once someone's on the phone, once you're on a Zoom call or in face to face, that's when the conversation can really unfold and you can help someone understand those principles and concepts in more depth. But I think at that initial touch of the sales conversation, actually less is more. And I think there's something to be said for keeping it simple and keeping the conversation at a level where people feel comfortable sharing it and recommending it and referring it.
Absolutely. And if I can ask you, how do you feel when people are very responsive with you? So you like contact the company because they use a very clear language. But how do you feel? I think in my experience, I feel very, very honored that the person, a big company or even like a small professional, listen what I was saying. And most of the time they were like adapting their language to my way of explaining.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of those companies, we used for years and years. This is the thing. I feel like, especially when you are providing a service or an
We
ongoing
trust them.
service, then actually it is the trust that you build immediately, exactly, that really helps bring in the kind of clients who are long term clients who are willing to invest in the value that you deliver, because if they're shopping around for price, it means they don't really understand what they're buying. So I think there's something really interesting in that. Well, I think that's been a really interesting conversation to unpack the client's perspective. So if you've got any thoughts or if you've got any great examples, do let us know in the comments below. We'd always love to hear from you. And if you've got any questions for either me or Alessandro, you can find us on LinkedIn. I'll put our links in the description of the episode. So thank you very much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.